Welcome to CXD, the Engine Surf Design podcast, where we're sharing what you need to know to reimagine your customer experience and design it for delivery. On the show, we share insights, tools, and strategies to help you design and deliver win-win experiences, ones that are valuable for your customers as well as for your business. My name's Oliver King, and I'm a co-founder and a managing partner at Engine. Now, in today's episode, we want to continue the theme of customer experience within aviation, and specifically how customer experience thinking is shaping physical design of airport environments, and how creating experience master plans and seeing airports as destinations and experiences in their own right is ever more prevalent and critical for airport operators. So today, to get into this, I'm joined by James Samperi and David Pinder from Engine. James is a managing partner and managing director of Engine Studio in Dubai and was the founder of Engine's aviation practice back in the day. David is a design director here at Engine and our aviation practice lead, and a bit of a regular on your show, as you'll know. So without giving anything away, anything confidential away, but where are you both and what are you doing? It looks like we're all kind of like in different places in hotels rooms. Are we kind of on projects? What's happening?
Hi Olly, thanks for having me and hosting me on this particular episode. So I am probably within spitting distance of one of the airports in London. So we've been out here working with them to try and understand how we can do some magic with a very constrained airport environment. So we're sort of staying on the airport campus, just living and breathing the aviation experience. So it's we're right in the guts of project land. So that's where we are.
Good stuff. David, where are you? What's going on there?
Unlike James, I'm not close to home, actually on the other side of the pond up in North America, and we're working with some of our clients here to think about what might be a future customer experience strategy and vision to help them inform a rather exciting build, as well as a series of builds that are coming up in the near future.
Fantastic. So we're hearing a lot, aren't we, that customer experience seems to really be shaping kind of so many conversations about the build of an airport. Why is that? Why is customer experience such a consideration now when people are kind of thinking about, how we actually go about developing this airport? Has that always been a thing, or is that something new?
I think what's been increasingly evident is that lots of airports that we work with have always thought about infrastructure and operations first. So you build the infrastructure, you work out how to operate it, but because these things are around for such a long time, that requirement and that need tends to evolve as your passengers increase, your demographic changes, the routes change, etc. So actually the airport, because it's a living environment, the requirements of what that airport needs to do can change so dramatically over a period of time. So I think experience is becoming seen as a sort of adjunct to either infrastructure or process. In one sense, if you have an existing facility, to get the most out of this evolving facility that you have, like how do we start thinking about how to use the space differently? How do we have to reconfigure within the envelope that we have, within the constraints that we have, but make things as desirable and as intuitive and as efficient as possible? And I think why experience is really interesting in this context is because the success of the experience is like a contract between the people who operate the airport and the people who are using the airport, because as a passenger, you are directly impacting on other people's experience. So if you don't know what you're doing, that has a knock-on effect to other people. So it's within the airport's interest to kind of ensure that everyone is catered for, knows what they're doing, knows the next step, is catered for commercially, etc. So I think why it's becoming particularly interesting now is in increasingly constrained environments, it's how you can get a bit more bang for your buck from an existing facility, really.
From an experience point of view, from a customer experience point of view, and if we think sort of outside of aviation settings, that things have changed so rapidly. Our expectations of the services we want to receive have changed so rapidly, and therefore that sort of expectation of what good service, good experience is, can so quickly and easily kind of outstrip the facilities that have been developed to provide the stage that's set within an airport environment. And they can really, very quickly become out of step with what people want. And I love the idea you were saying about actually everybody within the airport, passengers particularly, are almost kind of like co-producing the experience, and helping them to kind of, get through that and not get in the way is critical. Do you see it that way, David?
No, I do, and I think to build on the point that James was saying then, I think also your point, Ollie, around the change in needs and expectations of customers or passengers. I think traditionally airport experiences were very functional. It was about getting from, helping travellers get from point A to point B. And I think, as we're starting to see more of now, there's a much broader set of needs and expectations around what that should be. So the idea of moving from, very much a transit hub to much more of a destination in its own right, where the airport becomes a much more integral part of their end-to-end travel experience, is certainly what we're seeing more and more of. With different clients from different locations across the world.
And that idea about making an airport a destination, I mean, that a destination can be a very sort of subjective term, can't it? So depending upon who you are and what your experience is, but what's the thinking behind that? How do we know if something is becoming a destination or not?
Well, I think when something's becoming a destination, I think what that means is that the airport, is being designed, it's been developed, to offer a variety of attractions, amenities, and services, that can entertain, it can engage travellers, but ultimately it's about making the airport experience more enjoyable and more memorable, beyond the functionality of having to get on an airplane and fly to a destination.
I think interesting when you think about airport as destination. I think when you take a step back, I think destination in the context of airport might mean different things. So there's a destination in terms of this might be a desirable place to connect. If you're on a long haul route, long haul travel, then actually it being a destination is because you're going to spend a significant amount of time there. So if you think about Changi Airport in Singapore, which is a connection hub, they're able to kind of put quite a lot of investment to make this really a spectacle. So they have the Jewel, which has the waterfall in the center of it, but they also have things like butterfly gardens, etc., because they know people are going to spend a significant amount of time connecting between flights there. I think there's also destination in the sense of point-to-point travel. So if you're a point-to-point airport, so say for instance you're an airport in a particular route that is key to the financial industry. So if you look at City Airport in London, for instance, a key destination might mean something different there, where it's a lot more about I have the opportunity to sort of meet people there. I have all the facilities that I need to be able to connect digitally to get my work done. And then there's destinations so airports, and this is part of the conversation that we were having today, actually, which is it's not only the airport as a destination with a big D, but it's how do you create destinations within the airport itself to actually drive passenger flow in certain areas of the airport. So how do you get the most out of your footprint? So
what's an example of that then?
So, for instance, one of the big challenges sometimes to airport design is there isn't that full visibility of what's over what you haven't yet seen. So what you tend to do is you tend to get people spending all of their time within the first thing that they come across because they're not sure what else is in the airport. What the idea is that what you want to do is disperse the offer across the footprint. So you want to drive people towards various different destinations that might be quite focused on different passenger types. So you might have a family zone, which is in a very quiet corner of the airport. You might have a business zone that has an open lounge, has like a bar next to it, might have a quiet zone that where you can do some calls. Sometimes there's a tendency to not think about the airport as many destinations in their own right, but just a homogenous set of offers. And I think there's something interesting about the kind of Russian doll uh, principle of kind of going, there's something within a something within a something within a something, and how we breadcrumb that and sort of communicate that to passengers is also a way to think about destinations when it comes to airports as well. So I think it's a useful sort of term to think about airports, but there might be different ways to manifest destination within airport design, if that makes sense.
James, I think you hit on a really important point there. Is when people don't really know what's happening in other parts of the airport, and I think often we talk about sort of great passenger experiences. I know we talk predominantly about the built environment today, but the built environment along with sort of the technology, along with the people combining together is really what delivers that great experience. So when you're thinking about designing the physical environment, it's also really important to think about what might be the digital enablement, the technology enablement that's starting to augment those physical experiences.
Yeah. And certainly, and when you're talking about sort of pulling people through the airport, there's, if you were just down to the place and sort of physical signposting, that'd be one thing. But yeah, how you're using technology to draw people through, how you're using, how you're kind of shaping their experiences before they're getting to the airport, how they begin to kind of plan their trips, how they can begin to manage their trips through, through digital means, helps them to get excited about what's at that airport and what they're going to do, and begin to kind of plan and imagine their trip much more. But so we have this thing where experience is critical. It needs to be considered deeply when we're getting into kind of designing a build. How do you go about doing that? How can airports go about doing that and making sure that they are beginning to build the right platform to deliver the experience they want? I mean, particularly like from a built environment point of view, getting the right built environment to deliver the right experience. What's the kind of the steps they should go through to do that?
I think sometimes customer experience or passenger experience or guest experience can often be a bolt on at the end. It's almost like a retrospective consideration of how do we improve things because things aren't working as we had imagined, and you're perhaps trying to sort of fix or mitigate some challenges that have emerged over time. So I think where we've seen the best results is really when you're at the inception of a new design. So it might be a greenfield site, so it might be a brand new airport facility. It might be an extension to an existing airport facility. Where the master planning is taking place, and where you're into the next phase of early design, so where you're starting to understand what you need from a capacity perspective, the number of passengers you're forecast to accommodate within that space. You've perhaps got to a level of design where you're trying to you already understand where things might be positioned. What you really need to do is to almost come from the ground up. So that's a very top-down way of going building first, down into the design, the requirements of what this building needs to do, driven by capacity, driven by forecast, driven by optimization of commercial space versus operational space. What you lose in that conversation is anything that comes bottom up, which is actually, who are these people? What is their turn up profile? How are they turning up? Are they coming by train? Are they coming by a drop off? But are they, what proportion of families are we going to get? What proportion of PRMs do we expect? Are these going to be sort of low cost carriers, and therefore might be more Gen Z customers versus, perhaps older, more affluent, longer haul travelers who come with, different expectations, etc. So what you lose is often some of the bottom up passenger requirements, if you just look at the building first. So we would always say, when you're in that, our understanding is that, you know, within the architectural process, if you're in Reba 2, this is like your concept design. This is where things are still malleable. So this is before you start putting costs around things. You need a passenger perspective and a passenger set of requirements and understanding how these journeys are going to work at that stage. So I think it's really in that master planning phase that you need, you get the biggest bang for your buck if you're thinking about experience at that early design phase.
And James, you were talking about thinking about greenfield sites, but when an airport is up and running and operating, is the process any different about how they begin to understand how to redevelop it?
Yes, which is a short answer, but I guess the so if you have an existing so what's really interesting, what I find really interesting about an airport is you're effectively trying to build a car whilst you're driving it, because it never closes. You know, it's not like a shop where you just close it down and you kind of go, well, let's rethink the layout. You've effectively got to do everything on the move. So actually every action has a reaction in the live environment, which is the real challenge of where you've got a live airport and a live operation. So in essence, that's why experience is a really interesting sort of bridge between operations and your sort of design, strategy and development side of the airport, which are your sort of typical departments where that experience activity might take place. Because you have the ops guys who are worried about on the day, and then you have, as in what the operations like on the day, you have your strategy and development guys who probably have a perspective on, right, what's going to happen in 3 years, what's going to happen in 5 years. And it's experience sometimes that has to marry those two worlds together and be able to kind of connect okay, so what can we do today, and what's the knock-on effect to the operation, and how does that sow the seeds for what's coming next. So sometimes the biggest challenge when you're designing the experience for a current operation that's live, for a current airport that you're just trying to upgrade, it's about what can you impact meaningfully without completely knocking the airport operation out of whack. We sometimes therefore look at things that perhaps we can have the most control over. So so what I mean by that is, because it's such a multi-stakeholder environment, you know, we always think as a passenger that the airport is the airport is the airport. It's a single entity, whereas in fact it's like a myriad of different people coming together, different companies, airlines, people who manage the bags, people running restaurants, and the sort of cash exchange people. You know, this is like a little mini city. So what you need to do is go, as an airport, what can we impact in a very self-contained way that can have a maximum impact on passengers? So what we're often doing is looking at the overarching experience, looking at what we want it to be, then identifying the bits that we can have the most impact as the airport almost immediately, that set the seeds for that. So that might be, what can we do in the front line? What can we do on the information desk? What can we do for information before you fly? How can we improve the wayfinding? And then some of the longer term projects require you to sort of engage those other partners in the bigger vision to be able to kind of bring those things online a bit later on. So I think with a live airport, it's more systematic negotiation of what you're able to do when within a live passenger environment. Whereas what you can do with a greenfield site is you can be much more vision led, bring everyone along on the design process, get everyone bought into the big idea and the bigger idea and how it all fits together. So you're sort of, it's the contrast between those two ideas or those two worlds that you need to marry when you're thinking about experience.
But surely the greenfield is a blank sheet of paper. Surely you need to have much more collaboration amongst the airport community when you're trying to, reimagine an experience that's actually, as you say, like the engine's running, it's kind of going along. You need much more collaboration in that space, don't you?
I think the amount of collaboration is, I think it's arguably the same in both. I think one of the big challenges when the airport's live and operational, it's, how do you begin to manage the customer experience during that construction phase? Because as we know, it's not. James mentioned there before that it's not going to stop. It's not going to shut down. So it's still going to be operational. There's still going to be operation there whilst you're trying to improve infrastructure, improve technology, which often with any sort of build there comes disruption. So how do you manage that disruption, but also how do you use the disruption almost as an opportunity to not only just maintain, but how do you continue to try and get incremental improvements in certain areas during that time?
And I guess like with the construction, with all the hoardings and that are going up, there's opportunities, aren't there, to really begin to give passengers a taste of what's coming, to begin to kind of get them excited, to kind of see the change. And there are lots of activations that you can do, in that moment that can be very much aligned to what your future vision is for that experience. You can begin to allow them to kind of get tasters of what's to come.
Yeah, it's I mean, back to your collaboration point, I think nothing happens in an airport unless you can collaborate with others effectively. It's a really interesting ecosystem, and whatever you're doing, you have to try and collaborate across that ecosystem. Because even down to changing, if you change one thing, say you change a piece of information, like instructional information in departures, it's going to have an impact in security. So actually security have to be signed up to that thing that you just told people about when they've just turned up through the building, even though they may not have any sort of direct operational responsibility for that thing. So it's a fine balance in both instances, whether it be a new site or an existing site, in how you make things happen. And I think the best airports, I think, that we've sort of had the pleasure of working with have been able to create really good relationships with all of those stakeholders. So that isn't on a project by project basis. That's almost on, day in, day out, they're working with them alongside. And I think some of the biggest challenges you will find in airport and airline passenger experience is because the collaboration between the different stakeholders is really poor. So it's a real sort of, it's part of the DNA of getting this stuff right, is getting the way that you collaborate with these different stakeholders just to the point where people are bought in, their views are respected, you can challenge each other, but all with a positive view of how do we make this experience better.
Yeah, reminds me of Helsinki Airport, and just to drop it again because they're so cool. They've recently been voted to number one airport in Europe, which is absolutely amazing. And I think a lot of that is probably down to how the airport operator Finavia works in such close partnership with Finnair, and we were commissioned to do a project for them, which typically looks at what's their future passenger experience, how do they really kind of set themselves apart as an airport hub. They're kind of a gateway hub through to the east, through to China, etc. So they were kind of competing against more northern European airports. One of the first things you do when you're in these projects is you try to kind of get them together and identify what this vision is going to be for their future experience, and very quickly we zeroed in on this idea of when you sort of bring together the sort of an engineering and operational excellence of the Finns and how kind of super amazing they are with technology. And I think they've like never ever had a plane that's been delayed because of snow. You could have like 20 foot of snow at the airport. They clear it. The planes always take off. They have incredible kind of turnaround times there. So this idea of operational excellence was incredible. But this came together in this vision that was developed around this idea of like beautifully orchestrated Nordic wonder. And that just as a central vision idea, this thing about bringing together this sort of engineering excellence and also this incredible sense of place with this Nordic wonder, this incredible, land that they live in. And when you sort of get into some of the details of that, you can see how these things begin to, speak both to the operator and the airline and the experience that people want. So we were talking about, how they were using smart processes in there to make sure the experience was as fast and reliable as possible, how you could create these incredibly smooth transitions, how you could have as a design principle ideas and sort of like, thoughtful reduction to, really minimize things down to that typical, beautiful kind of Scandinavian quality there is that you experience, but also like, in this idea, this principle of everything being joined up, how the two businesses really work together, because they had this idea of one service and realizing that actually it was about cooperation between everyone within the airport community, the operators, the various agencies in there, the airlines, creating this one experience that people were having and realizing how they all need to kind of get together behind this vision to deliver it. The joined up principle enabled them to, really focus in on how they designed experiences right around passengers. So passengers felt, very much at the center of an entirely personalized experience. They spent a lot of time discussing how they could create really intelligent infrastructure, how they could kind of use that, digitally to make sure that customers were getting really kind of timely contextual information as they were going through those experiences. And then there are other things which are so Scandinavian about this idea of sense of place, and how they want to really kind of leverage on things like rejuvenation and recovery. So within the design of the airport and the experience, they're really emphasizing the quality of the spaces, the quality of the food, the quality of the atmosphere that was in there, the purity of nature, this idea of kind of quiet luxury, and how all of this got brought into the airport, the materials they're using, the way things were laid out, was absolutely beautiful. We've had other things like that, haven't we? Like that was for an airport in Finland, but going out to the Middle East, and there are lots of cultural references there, aren't there, that you can begin to bring back into an airport.
I think any airport you speak to will talk about sense of place. Because effectively, an airport being either the gateway into a country or a city, etc., there is something about the airport which feels like the front door of that country. So there's a role that the aviation sector plays and airports play in sort of introducing people to that country, and especially if you're a connecting passenger. So with Dubai airports, 80% of their passenger traffic is connections. So it's only 20% of people that actually visit Dubai. So what you want to try and do is give them a taste of Dubai, like the real Dubai, within the airport itself. So this idea of sense of place, I think, is a common thread all the way through. And David, I know there was a lot that you had tried to do, not only sense of place in sort of the physical environment, but you were talking about how do we do almost like sense of place through people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to that, it's easy to think a sense of place is some sort of talkless and touches in terms of the environments, but how do you really begin to deliver a sense of place through people? So, for example, in Dubai, Arabian hospitality is such a big thing. We experience it in the hotels, but then how do you kind of deliver that sense, that feeling through the cleaning teams? How do you deliver that through the people that are working at the security checkpoints? How does that come through at immigration? So what is that warm welcome into the country that really underpins some of the values behind Arabian hospitality? My home is your home. And when you live there, when you work there, you feel it in the city. We're in a different city at the moment in sort of North America, and being out of towners, when you come in here, you really get a sense of it. Now, often for people who are here, it's almost invisible because it's their day to day. But when you've got this sort of fresh perspective coming in, you really do get that warmth, and I think it's really really important to say it's not just what you're doing in an airport; it's how you're doing it, and I think it's the combination of the functional with that sort of behavioural element and bringing those things together can really create a really positive impression of the locality, but also really begin to sort of personify the brand as well.
It is critical, isn't it? It's that impression. And when you're, when you land in a country, and if you come up against what you perceive to be some sort of like hostile immigration process,
Yeah.
real, po-faced, angry looking kind of immigration officers, that really sets the tone for you. And likewise, when you're leaving, if your gate experience is absolutely stressful and chaotic, you kind of slump onto the plane at the end, kind of going, "Thank God that's over with." I'm never going back there. That was a nightmare.
I think often an airport stands for something much bigger than the physical infrastructure and the experience people have in there. It's often safeguarding against the country's reputation as well, which I think has a much bigger emphasis. And as James mentioned before about the airport's the gateway to the country. It's often kind of the mirror of the country. So often people's expectations of what that's like is set based upon their airport experience. So I think it's really important that point around sort of protecting or safeguarding reputation, not just at an airport level, but also think about what that means in terms of at a country level.
That's really interesting because while you were talking, I was thinking of there's a phrase one of our clients um, who'd worked in aviation their entire life. He was saying the best airport experience is no airport experience at all. So, what he was essentially saying is what we want to do is remove as much of the headache around the processes and the processing as much as possible and actually focus on the sort of the airport as the destination as being this start to a pleasurable experience. So I think that's essentially always the sentiment of what airports are trying to achieve. Two things: minimize the impact of the necessary, and then maximize the impact of the desirable, and being able to kind of combine those two things together in the best way possible. And I think from an experience master planning perspective, the last thing that I'd say about that is the real value of doing that is to ensure airports don't just build airports which were fit for purpose for say 30 years ago. What aviation is not always great at is thinking beyond aviation. So what we should be doing when we're thinking about an experience master plan for a future airport is thinking about, do we need 50 check-in desks when everyone is checking in at home? Can the check-in be dispersed within the city itself where it's more convenient? Can we create retail which is much more akin with how we shop today? It's airport retail has been the same for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, is nothing like how we shop anywhere else in the world. So any future experience master plan needs to build in what we know of us as people and how we behave elsewhere and bring more of that into the airport environment. So the experience master plan is to try and bring that external perspective into how we design those future airports.
So coming back to this idea of the customer experience master plan. So, I mean, what is that? Is that just a document, or is that as kind of a collection of things? And in what form does it take, and what's it beginning to set out that architects, developers can use? What does a good one look like?
So I guess it's worth first saying that experience master plan is sort of a phrase that we've used quite extensively within the work that we do. It isn't necessarily something that's universally talked about yet, although actually a lot of airports and airlines, in fact, are looking for an approach like what we provide. So experience master planning is effectively more of an approach to how do you, at the planning and strategy phase of a airport design, how do you effectively plan for and define and design the target experience of all the passengers who are going to use that airport, often with a 5 to 10 year threshold of a perspective of 5 to 10 years. So typically there will be a infrastructure master plan, which will be very much focused on the physical build, driven by architects, planning teams, forecasting teams. The experience master plan is effectively an overlay onto an infrastructure master plan that begins to challenge the physical infrastructure, begins to identify opportunities for the physical infrastructure to support the on-the-ground passenger experience. But importantly, the experience master plan is beyond infrastructure. It also looks at the other multiple dimensions of what makes up an experience, which aren't represented within the current build strategy around an airport. So things like services, things like products, things like staff roles, staff levels, staff allocations, digital. How does digital work? From what do we drive to people's personal devices? How do we use dynamic information within the space? How do we use digital services once you're in the airport? So ultimately, what the Experience Master Plan should give you is effectively a holistic strategy for what needs to happen with people, place, products, processes, and communications to be able to enhance the experience of what passengers will experience in that future build. And it should influence all those different aspects of the airport. So parts of it will be most relevant for operations, parts of it will be super relevant for commercial. And it's the idea that if we have this red thread, so ultimately, if we think about the airport as a product, one big product with a big P for passengers, like a B2C product, then how does everyone and everyone's effort contribute to making that the best version of it that it can be? So that's the experience master plan component and how it sort of overlays over some of the existing effort. And the other thing it will complement is some airports have it, some other airports don't. They have a operational plan, which is sometimes called a concept of operation. So it's effectively, what do we need from a manpower, technology, process perspective to operate this facility successfully? So if you think that you have the building bit, you have the operational bit, this is the bit that sort of connects that bridge metaphor that I used before, in terms of on the day and strategy. This is also the Experience Master Plan is the bridge between the operational plan and the infrastructure plan.
I was wondering kind of how we sort of turn the corner with this. So if someone's sitting there kind of going, right, okay, I've got there's a build coming up. We need to start thinking about this. What advice would we give them as sort of the first steps that they need to go through to begin to think about this and kind of get their ducks in a row?
Yeah. So, I think, one of the things we've been talking about, throughout the podcast today is definitely around the importance of developing a customer experience master plan. Some of the things that we touched upon there today is within that master plan is really understanding who our different customer types are, beginning to define, what is the big idea for that future vision that we want to deliver in that space, but not just about the space, more broadly as well. Think about how that vision then might manifest itself as a set of sort of propositions and concepts. Then how do they then come together We need to deliver those sort of end-to-end seamless connected experiences. Then off the back of that, what does that then mean in terms of what we need to build? What does that mean for our people? What does that mean for our technology? And it's a combination of those things coming together, underpinned by the right operation, that's ultimately going to start to deliver a great customer experience. But it's also going to really begin to safeguard that investment so that we know what we're then going to be investing in is going to deliver the value that we want in terms of the customer experience. So I think that would be my recommendation in terms of approach. Definitely start to think about customer experience master plan and probably do it sooner rather than later.
Brilliant. Thank you. Guys, brilliant conversation. I've loved it. But we have to draw it to a close. In the description, lots of links to things that hopefully people will find useful. We have our passenger experience checklist, for example, that you can use to help kind of self-assess current performance, identify kind of opportunity areas. If you want to get in touch, please do. And please remember to share and follow CXD on all your channels, and come back again real soon for more insights, ideas, thoughts, inspiration. Until then, James, David, thank you so much, guys. Everybody, see you again soon. All the best.